Hello, this is Becky Steinbrunner. I am your host today for the next 2 hours on Community Matters. I am not sure I'm on, but I think I am. So I'm going to begin our program today by welcoming you to Community Matters and SantaCruzVoice.com. The goal of Santa Cruz Voice is to provide a forum for local people, local issues, and you, as a member of the public, to get on the air, to learn, to become active in what's going on around you, around all of us, and take part in it to the best of your ability and to the best of your interests. I want to thank Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center here at 325 SoCal Avenue in Santa Cruz for hosting our studio here in Santa Cruz. It is located at 325 SoCal Avenue between Ocean Street and San Lorenzo River. Today, we have two guests that are going to be on. The first hour will be Mr. Ross Gibson. He is calling in now to join us for the first hour, and we'll be talking about the Redman-Hirahara Farmstead in Watsonville and what is happening with that. That follows up on my guest last week, Carell Reeder, who also we discussed that. She was a member of the foundation in the 1990s, that tried to save that wonderful building, and we talked about the history of it. Mr. Ross Gibson will be the guest during the first hour talking about the Redman-Hirahara House and historic preservation in Santa Cruz County. My guest the second hour will be Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing. Initially, he was to have a half an hour, and Miss Chris Kirby was going to have the second half of that hour. She agreed that what has happened in our community in Moss Landing, fires and lithium battery fires, is too important to relegate it just to a half an hour. So she ceded her time very graciously, and it was her idea to provide a full second hour to focus on Never Again Moss Landing and the issues going on in Santa Cruz County as well around this. There are 3 sites that are proposed for these large battery lithium storage projects. So listen in the second hour. I'm going to bring in my first guest now, Mr. Ross Gibson. Hello, Mr. Gibson.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. How about me?
Excellent. You're coming in just fine. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking time to join us here today on Community Matters. I gave a brief introduction for the audience about what we'll be talking about, but I am very, very appreciative of all that you do in
Thank you.
the county for historic preservation. You have an article every Monday in the Santa Cruz Sentinel that it is, I will be quite honest with you, the only reason we still subscribe to the Sentinel, or
Oh,
one of them, because your articles are well researched and wonderful to read and really bring local history alive. So I want to thank you for that ton of work.
well, my pleasure. I mean, it comes from 40 years of experience in historic preservation, not always successful, but knowing what the issues are and trying to find the best avenue forward.
Indeed, indeed. It is a challenge, isn't it? Well, I'd like,
Always, even when you have all of the laws on your side, you have to convince people who are representing you that this is this is the way you can go. You
yeah.
have the law behind you.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself, please, and tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm Ross Gibson. I was born in Santa Cruz and then have lived all over Northern California. And when I returned to Santa Cruz, I came back kind of as a stranger in the sense that I had to explore my own history. And I just loved the beautiful buildings and all. Most of my life, I've been connected with agriculture in some way. My mom had a florist shop and nursery back in the 50s, and so we knew all about the flower crops around Santa Cruz.
Mm.
And when I was in high school, I worked on a cattle ranch and a sheep ranch. So for me, the California ranch house, I didn't know where that model came from.
Mm.
I didn't realize it was Santa Cruz because
Really?
for me, the ranch houses that I'd seen were the mansions off in a field.
Mm.
And that's why the Redman house means an awful lot to me, especially coming into Santa Cruz County from the south. I always feel like, yes, I'm coming home.
Mm. Where was your mom's florist shop and greenhouse?
It was on Ocean Street. She had a many gabled cottage that was built in the 1930s as the Golden Bulb flower shop.
Ah.
And she raised flowers with her partner, Shirley Beneke, who later moved on to found the Purple Edge florists in Felton and the gift shop up at the Arboretum.
Oh. Wow. That's that's another beautiful piece of Santa Cruz County history that has gone. There are no more bulbs, no more. Well, I don't know if there are any cut flower producers much left in Watsonville because the imports have driven a lot of them out. But
That's true.
yeah.
And when you think that, you know, you got your garden just right, then they say, well, no, those are non-natives. And who cares? Beauty is beauty, and the world is our oyster anyway.
Exactly. Yes. And now with the whole push to conserve water, many of the beautiful rhododendron and azalea gardens that are do require more water are being taken away, and
Hmm.
yeah, that's a thing, isn't it? Well, I
Well,
want to
it's
go ahead.
possible to plant your garden in other than desert plants because Santa Cruz has never been a desert.
No, no, it's quite the paradise. I remember uh, what Pacific Garden Mall used to look like before the earthquake, and it was quite a garden indeed.
It was, and a real delight in its culture.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'd like to pivot over to what's going on in Watsonville. We talk about agriculture, that Pajaro Valley is a big agricultural center in our county. And there, next to Highway 1, as one goes off heading south or coming from the south near Riverside Drive, is the Redman-Hirahara House and Farmstead. Tell us what you know about that property. Many people dismiss it as a rundown old house, but they just don't know the story, do they?
No, no, there's a real emotional story behind it, but also a story of great successes. Um, James Hirahara, James Redman, uh, married and brought his wife to the Pajaro Valley from San Francisco, and he put the best of everything in the house in 1897 when it was built, so that she would not feel so remote out in the country like this. but they loved their country lifestyle, and they raised sugar beets when Spreckels built the largest refinery on the West Coast, for sugar beets. And then when he moved out of town and rebuilt his plant in Spreckels, California, then they shifted over to strawberries. And the strawberry variety, there were many varieties of strawberries, but the variety they used was the Banner strawberry, which is introduced by Ed Reiter and Richard Driscoll in 1904, 1905. And they had chosen it because it was the most prolific and had the largest yield and the most delicious flavor. And so it became the real star of the Pajaro Valley, right next to apples. And after World War I, a local promotional brochure advertised that Pajaro Valley was the largest berry field in the world. So after Hirahara, well, actually, in 1893, there was a depression, and a lot of the berry growers were joined by displaced white workers and Japanese migrants who had just come into the country. And the only way that they got up to the top was by working for less than the existing workforce. So, but that was the beginning of the Japanese in the Pajaro Valley berry industry. They really made a name for themselves and became expert in the field, so that now people were hiring them not because they were cheap, but because they knew what they were doing to get the best yield out of crops. And it was a great shock after Pearl Harbor when they started to move all of the Japanese, both natives and non-natives, to internment camps, and 2/3 of them were born in America. So this was just a major injustice, and they were only given a day or so to sell everything they owned and pack one suitcase and get on the bus and go to places they didn't know. So it was a heartbreaking period, but thank goodness for friends in the valley who were able to help the people in the internment camps to manage their property and take care of things. And it was, what was his name?
Was it McHenry or?
It's something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, they hired a lawyer, and the lawyer took care of stuff, and they had put the house in a miner's name, so he was actually looking after the interests of a miner landowner. And then when the war ended, there was a housing shortage throughout the United States as soldiers came back. And so the returning Hiraharas went back to their home, and they opened up spaces in their shed, which might have been farm worker spaces, I don't know. But they opened up spaces for 4 Japanese families who were destitute after the internment, and gave them places to live that were reminiscent of the internment camps themselves. But many of the people who returned, who were who had their properties taken care of by Driscoll and Ryder families, found their farms had been left so that they could return to them and have their grower agreements reinstated.
Mm-hmm. I think they also, the neighbors also paid the property taxes, is what I've been told,
Yes,
for the Japanese Americans that were imprisoned. That didn't
exactly.
happen in Salinas. It was quite a different story in Salinas.
Oh, I know. It's something to be proud of that people
Indeed.
are stepping up and could understand, even in the time of great fear,
Yeah.
that the Japanese they knew were not enemies.
Yeah. And I want to say that that barn that was turned into apartments has fallen down. But
I know.
before it fell down, there was an archaeologist, and stop me if you're going to talk about this, Mr. Gibson. Mr.
No, go right ahead.
Rob Edwards went in with his Cabrillo College archaeology students, and they went in and they collected artifacts from that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were stored, I guess, at the Museum of Art and History or someone, maybe UCSC, I'm not sure. But recently there's been a young fellow do his PhD doctorate on cataloging all of that, Mr. Jacob Stone.
Oh, how wonderful.
Indeed, indeed. So I interrupted you about that apartment and the significance of the apartment because it's even worse shape, really. But
I know.
a
We had,
huge story.
as part of the, what do you call it? The uh, application for historic place building.
Oh yes, DPR is what I
Yeah,
know. Yeah, I don't know what that stands for. I just know it's a DPR as a report.
Department of. I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
No, it's all right. But it's a rather extensive and expensive study that is done on a piece of property to verify its historic and cultural significance so that it can be listed with at different levels. Um,
It's like Department of Recreation, I think,
yes, I think that's it. Department
under
of
the
Recreation.
State and National Recreation.
Yes. So the Hiraharas came home after being imprisoned and
Hmm.
gave a place to live for four families at least, and maybe it rotated throughout. So some came and some went on. But what else do you know? Can you tell the listeners about the Redman-Hirahara house be going forward from that point?
Well, the Hirahara sold it in 1982, and after that, but they allowed the matron to stay until her passing in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, of course, we had the earthquake in 1989,
Mm-hmm.
and the place was red tagged, which means it was slated for demolition. And this was something that was of great concern to me because I was trying to get the Historic Preservation Commission to save the Cooper House in downtown Santa Cruz.
Oh gosh,
It was
yes.
such a landmark. It was our old courthouse and had been turned into kind of a bohemian center of arts and crafts, and had live music and restaurants, and everybody described it as the heart of Santa Cruz. And when the earthquake came, FEMA said that there would be no they would charge. There would be no charges for demolishing buildings if they got in before 10 days or before 30 days. They kept changing it, or before 90 days. And this panicked a lot of the people. The city council turned the decision-making over to city manager Dick Wilson, and he had people come in and examine the different buildings. And if they couldn't get in, they simply red tagged them, mostly unreinforced masonry structures. And I had wanted them to, I had wanted the Historic Preservation Commission to speak up, because they were making decisions on historic landmarks that were important landmarks to us.
Indeed.
And they wouldn't. They said that this was an emergency situation and they needed to follow the chain of command.
Oh.
And Sarah Ray and Sarah Boutelle told me later that they weren't getting anywhere with the rest of their commission either, because they were commissioners on the Historic Preservation Commission.
For the city of Santa Cruz, correct?
For the city.
Yeah.
But they felt that their sympathies lay more with the businesses than for the buildings.
Oh.
And I said, well, if we tear down all the buildings, there won't be places for the businesses to go.
Exactly.
This would be at least a 10-year rebuilding process.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's see now, on the 10th day after the earthquake, it was declared that the Cooper House would be demolished. And Dick Wilson said he wished that they had held an open meeting when they made their decision, because it was behind closed doors. There was no recording of the meeting, and and he felt that it was giving people the wrong impression. But what I felt the big omission was, they didn't have anybody there to examine the Cooper House in regards to a preservation approach, because this was a national downtown historic district, and that meant that we were supposed to abide by national standards, and we weren't letting anybody look at the building that might have had an effect. And a friend of mine, Mike, Michael Bates, he was the one who had already finished a job to seismically retrofit the Cooper House. And he said when the earthquake occurred, he ran back to the Cooper House, ran clear up to the attic, and was proud that so many of his fixes had held so that the building didn't collapse. And he said, why didn't they include me on their tour? He said, I know every inch of that building and exactly where all the faults could have happened. And he said they probably thought that some of the construction mess that I had left was actually earthquake damage, because he wasn't there to say anything.
Oh.
So the Cooper House came down because no one would acknowledge that it was a landmark and would examine it on behalf of landmark preservation. There's always a preservation option, and at least two of the people who went in it, let's see now, well, there was a contractor who came in right after, about 2 days after the quake, and he said because the building was in good shape and he could walk into it, unlike several other buildings, he felt that it was a good candidate for reconstruction and retrofitting and all. And who was it? Mark Premack was also desperately trying to get people interested in saving the building, but it was happening so fast.
Yeah.
10 days in this panic to get it free from FEMA was screwing things up. So I don't want to see that happen a second time with our beautiful Redman-Hirahara house.
Yeah. For those of you who've just tuned in, we're talking with Mr. Ross Gibson, local historian in Santa Cruz County. We're primarily talking about the Redman-Hirahara house and farmstead in Watsonville. That's the three-story Victorian home on the ocean side of Highway 1 in Watsonville as you approach the last or the first, whichever direction, the Riverside Drive exit. And what's happening now is that for some reason, the Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission took action in February to recommend delisting that piece of property from the National Historic Registry and plan to take that to the County Board of Supervisors very soon to get them to bless delisting and demolition of that incredible building and its history. Mr. Gibson, can you tell us a little bit about William Weeks? He was the architect of that Redman-Hirahara house.
Yes, William Weeks was a very prolific architect for his day because, for one thing, where to go? People, well, let's see, I've got it here somewhere.
I was reading a little bit, and while you're finding your document there, you've probably got a bunch of things. I was looking through the paperwork that the foundation, the Save the Redman House Foundation, people put together and got it on the National Historic Registry in 2004, that they included about William Weeks. It said he was a resident of Watsonville for 18 years and designed many beautiful buildings in the county and very well known. Some say that he designed buildings of convenience, of beauty, and of a substantial character that will stand for many years to come. Indeed, they are all very well built and have withstood the time. Built in 1897, this one was, but there are others in Santa Cruz County. So,
he worked quite exceptionally well. I mean, you really got your money's worth for a William Weeks building. It wasn't above what most middle-class builders could afford. And he put in all the bells and whistles so that he would beautify it along the way. Let's see, here's what I wanted to say. He had filled Watsonville with 150 structures, giving the town its distinctive character. He became the most prolific architect in California, designing buildings for over 161 California cities, plus others in Nevada and Oregon. And this is believed to be the only farmhouse that he designed.
Really, this is the only farmhouse designed by William Weeks.
I don't know if that's fully accurate, because there could be some others that we just haven't documented.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have to say, the mansion type of farmhouse exists elsewhere in Santa Cruz County. There's the oh gosh, trying to get names has always been my downfall.
That's all right. You're a researcher and you've got them on your desk and at your fingertips, I know.
Well, anyway, there's different examples. We were just talking about one a few articles ago. um, the Billings House
Ah,
that is where the Pasatiempo Golf Course is today.
ah.
And then there was another mansion out at the Powder Works, uh, just off in the Redwoods, looking down on the Powder Work compound
It's in Santa Cruz or Davenport?
in Highway 9.
Highway 9.
Just as it's called Paradise Park now.
Oh, yes, Paradise Park.
Yeah. So this is our heritage. This type of farmhouse construction. It shows that this wasn't a hand-to-mouth existence like a Dust Bowl refugee, but it was a place where the growing conditions were excellent and people prospered because of it.
Yeah. And that is the heart of the Pajaro Valley. That is why it is still a very rich agricultural area.
Absolutely.
And and the people of this county should be very proud of that and want to showcase that, along with what I consider a golden piece of history that this home and farm was saved by the people who,
Yes.
for the Hirahara family, and enabled other Japanese American citizens to come back and get back on their feet. And for the life of me, I do not understand why no one wants to demolish such a thing. Do you want to talk a little bit? You wrote an article recently in the Santa Cruz Sentinel about the actions that the County Historic Resources Commission took in in February. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Um, from listening to the tape of it, I was kind of astounded that they seemed to think their job was not preservation. I mean, of course, it's called a Historic Resources Commission instead of a Preservation Commission, but preservation is always the go-to,
Mm-hmm.
not the last chance. And I thought that their reasons for tearing down the house didn't seem to add up. For
Yeah.
one thing, they said it was uninhabitable and no longer had hookups for uh, various things. And I was thinking, well, you know, I remember when the Castro adobe was uninhabitable,
Mm.
and we were afraid it was going to fall down on its own. We were so concerned, along with Edna Kimbrough, that we had lost it, and their solution was eventually to sell it to the Parks Commission and have them do the restoration work. And it seems to me that's kind of a model for a successful way to do it, because now they have completed all of the seismic retrofitting and all of the stabilizing, and you know it's just mud brick.
Yeah.
There was very little holding it up during a very scary period of our history, and they happened to do a wonderful job. And I was thinking, there's always a solution for a way to have restoration. If the building is in poor condition, well, let's see. The trying to pull out my.
For anybody that hasn't gone to the Castro Adobe, it is open, I think, one day a month. And if you watch in the Santa Cruz Sentinel, in the coastlines, they announce their open houses. It is a delight, let me tell you. And thank goodness it was preserved.
Yes. Um, well, the various things that you need to know is that in responding to a disaster, the various things are preserve, rehabilitate, restore, or reconstruct. So each of these is an end in itself. They're not do them all. But preserve is when you can save as much of the landmark as possible. Rehabilitate is when you have to make compromises and have adaptive reuse through alternatives and additions. Restore is when you return it to a significant period of its time, replacing missing historic features and eliminating modernizations, thus bringing its utilities also up to code. And finally, reconstruct is when the landmark is either missing or dilapidated, and it is reconstructed for interpretive purposes. And that always sounds like the worst excuse, because it's considered an adverse impact on the historic resource if you have to tear it down and start from scratch. And demolition by neglect is not a good reason to reward negligent property owners with a demolition permit, because a dilapidated or missing national landmark may still retain an obligation for reconstruction. An example is Venice, Italy, where St. Mark's Campanile, everybody goes and takes pictures of it as this ancient thing, and it's actually just a replica because the original collapsed in an earthquake in 1902. But they did it in such a way that it retains its historic integrity. And even the White House, if you can believe it, is not original. Only the exterior walls are original, but in 1959, when Eisenhower was in there, Eisenhower and his wife were moved out quickly because they felt the structure was too unstable, and they gutted it.
Wow.
And they ended up rebuilding the interior with modern materials and using an earlier colonial-type style, but nonetheless, it was uninhabitable for a short period. And now it's still our nation's pride and joy.
Indeed.
So it's never a good idea to approve an historic demolition permit before approving a replacement project, just to make sure that the replacement mitigates the loss of a significant landmark.
Explain to the listeners why it is such a big deal that the Redman-Hirahara house is on the National Historic Registry. What does that mean, and why does it matter?
That means that it was determined to be of national importance, not just a local or even just a state significance. There's various ways to identify what's important about it. I mean, for one thing, it's one of the most attractive farms in the Pajaro Valley and a highly visible gateway landmark and iconic Watsonville farmhouse. And it's the work of William Weeks, as we have said, and the agricultural connections to Spreckle Sugar and Reiter Driscoll strawberries is a major contributing factor. And the affluence of California farming in the area, ideal growing conditions, is important. And then, of course, the Japanese internment during World War II and its after effects have an important interpretive example here. And even to in my feelings, if it was interpretive for that particular period, Farewell to Manzanar by county authors Jeannie Wakasuchi and her husband James D. Houston would be included in that local history. And then the migrant workers' experience, with some of them even leading to farming success. So this covers a wide span of subjects for one single building and for one single landmark. It's both local and national, and it's something that we need to be proud of.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I know I was worried that the County Board of Supervisors might have this on their agenda for next Tuesday to delist it. I picked up a paper copy of the agenda in front of the county building this morning and did not see it, but they can change it over the weekend. So we need to be vigilant here.
Well, if I could offer suggestions,
Please.
an appropriate process for assessing the Redman-Hirahara house, other than just assessing it for demolition, because that's a preordained choice, would be one, to conserve, use quick fixes to prevent further deterioration. Two, document the building. No demolition should be considered until the structure is fully documented with photos and sketches regarding finishes, wallpaper, blueprints, elevations, and details. This needs to be done because we don't have that documentation other than the application paper for the trust.
Mm-hmm.
Then have estimates. Instead of seeking estimates to delist and demolish the building, seek estimates for restoration or reconstruction options. We don't know these. Working on just half information is not a good place to be. And then organize. People are more likely to get on board if there's a vision pamphlet, and more likely to contribute if there's a fundraising goal. So create a nonprofit status if needed. And then sponsors and alliances. Gather sponsors, large and small, especially from Santa Cruz and surrounding counties. Seek an alliance with Emma Prush Farm Park in San Jose,
Indeed.
which was once an intended model for the Redman-Hirahara Gateway Farm Museum. Likewise, connect with state parks should that be a better source of restoration assistance. So,
Excellent. Those are all excellent suggestions. What do we do? What do we do first? How do we convince our supervisors to hold off? What is the urgency? What is the urgency?
Well, and here's something else. Salvage companies have shown an interest in the Redman House because of what Historic Resources Commission has characterized as garbage. And actually, it has intrinsic value for 2,000-year-old virgin heart redwood beams no longer being harvested. These are something a salvage company would be very interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's rare woods, pillars, staircases, moldings, curved glass, stained glass, and other character-defining features.
Yes, that was the point that really upset me a lot. Mr. Gibson, I've been attending Santa Cruz County Historic Resources Commission meetings for a long time. Mm-hmm. They have recently changed when they are held because the county has been trying to cut back on the number of commission meetings in general. So I got no notification of the February meeting, and later when I went to look, thinking that it should be about time, that's how I learned that all of this had transpired and that the county Historic Resources Commissioners had even voted to spend $600 out of their own very meager budget to pay for the building inspector to come out and make the determination needed to get it going on the delisting
To be
process.
clear, none of these commissions have budgets. The last time we got a budget at Historic Preservation Commission in Santa Cruz was when somebody had to pay a fine for doing something illegal on their construction, and the city council allowed us to keep the fine as something that we could use for other things. So to get this kind of money and then to use it on demolition is just appalling.
I agree with you. I was shocked that they would even consider. It turned out that the property owner, Elite Development, owned by the Tutt family, they responded to Mr. Matthews' son's letter. He is the planning official who is the staff member liaison with the County Historic Resources Commission. He sent them a letter. It was undated. It's an undated letter. And they responded and they decided to pay. The owner paid for the county building inspector to come out, never went inside, only made this superficial determination that you've referred to that it is not habitable, and then relied on a document from a fellow in Pacific Grove who is not a registered historic preservation analyst. At least his credentials are not current. And he sent them videos that were from the internet of people going in clandestinely and at night and looking around with a bobbing headlight. That was his interior examination of the building.
Oh, for gosh sake.
Completely unacceptable. How could our commissioners who are charged with watching over these precious places in our county allow this? So
Yeah, we need a different approach. This is not an approach that should only be motivated by demolition desires. We need documentation of the building itself as part of the record of a National Historic Building.
Yes, yes. And so I want to, we are down to about our last 5 minutes already, Mr. Gibson. I want to thank you so much. But in doing some research, I think that people need to contact our county supervisor for that area that is in the 2nd District of Santa Cruz County. The new supervisor is Kim DeSerpa. She will be holding office hours this Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the South County Service Center that's located at 790 Green Valley Road in Watsonville. Again, that's Wednesday, this Wednesday, May 7th. Talk with her about it. Call her up. The phone number is 454-2200, and talk with her about how important it is that we step back. In my opinion, what is pushing this with the urgency that seems to have come forth rather quickly is that the city of Watsonville is planning to annex this area where the Redman-Hirahara Farmstead is and create what they call the Gateway Project that would be outlet stores and strip malls and things like that. Hardly a welcoming feature or a fitting feature for the Pajaro Valley when there is such a gem here that just needs to be preserved and given the glory that it deserves.
For me is that it's still framed by its agricultural field.
Yes.
It's the last kind of image that you'll see in Steinbeck country, reminding you of those wonderful days of farming.
Yes. I also learned while I was doing research that May 17th is the Santa Cruz County History Fair, and you will never guess where it's going to be held. It will be at the Buddhist temple in Watsonville.
Oh, how wonderful.
It is wonderful. But what a juxtaposition of things here with this wonderful story of the Hiraharas, um, poised to be erased by a simple action of the County Board of Supervisors and the very disappointing support of that, with a CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act exemption by the County Historic Resources Commissioners. So I,
I want to say
please.
I'm reminded of, in the current condition of the Redman-Hirahara house, it looks like the old Granville house in the film It's a Wonderful Life.
Mm.
George Bailey, or Jimmy Stewart, tells his girlfriend to break a window and make a wish. And Mary says, "But it's full of romance. I'd like to live in it."
Mm.
And George replied, "That old place, I wouldn't live in it as a ghost." But she breaks a window, and her wish comes true when she marries him, and they restore the building into their love nest.
Mm.
I wish that that could happen. Get us some angels to contribute or take part in preserving that building.
Indeed. So let's put our heads together and link arms and see what we can do. If anyone knows of someone, certainly it seems the Driscolls, the Riders, Lakeside Organics, the farmers that have made the Pajaro Valley what it is for the rich agricultural area and the sense of history. We need to make this happen and not let the Redman-Hirahara house be demolished.
And we need to do it in a loving way so that people will want to be part of this.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Gibson, I want to thank you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners?
I really appreciate coming on. I think the things that we need to do now are show up whenever there's a meeting, write whenever you can, and visit your representatives to make sure that they're representing you.
Exactly. Thank you. The Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors will be meeting next Tuesday, 9 a.m. at 701 Ocean Street. Even if it isn't on the agenda, people need to stand up and speak up and save the Redman-Hirahara Farmstead. It's a great place. And Mr. Gibson, I want to thank you for your good work, preserving history, keeping it alive, and helping us all remember the past and the importance of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me here today.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to say goodbye to you and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Take care. We'll be in touch soon to write some letters.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi, Becky. How are you?
Hi, Brian. I am fine. Thank you. Thank you so much for calling in. We've got a few minutes. Let's see. Let me just make sure that we're not on the air. Oh,
Sure, yeah.
okay. I think.
Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
I can. I can hear you,
Okay. I thought that was muting us to go out on the air, but I think it
yes.
muted us in general. So, how are you?
It's been crazy, Becky. It's almost overwhelming, but
Yeah.
trying to find balance is lacking in life right now, but that's just how it is. We're packing, we're moving, we're getting the old house ready to try and put on the market, the new house They're having some conflict with a neighbor, but that's just because of the luck of the draw, crazy neighbor.
Oh.
And then, Never Again stuff, which is there and always pressing, but working on that. Trying to cut back a little bit, on
Mm.
the amount of hours on Never Again so I can keep my family life going.
Mm.
Just stuff, just rolling
Mm-hmm.
with it all. Talking some extraordinary. One of the things I want to talk about is how we are Never Again is being contacted by some extraordinary organizations, and I've been in Zooms all day with people I've never met before,
Wow.
who want to bring resources into our community. So that's, I think, an important part of the story. That's an evolution that's starting to occur. I've been saying to Glenn Church that the cavalry's not coming in, by then I meant the state, and now the cavalry's coming in the form of these environmental and other groups that are trying to help us. So it's
Oh,
a new development that's occurring. It's really something to see.
that is excellent news.
Yeah,
I want to make sure you talk
yeah.
about that. Um, I'd like to begin our time. We've got about 4 minutes left for the
Mm-hmm.
news.
Yeah,
Um, that you can introduce yourself, um, talk a little bit. I'm always amazed when there are people who do not know about the Vistra fire.
yeah, yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that amazing?
yeah. It is. It's
So
hard to believe, but yeah,
it is, but you can describe that as much as you want, just
sure.
to
I
make
can do
sure
that.
that
Yeah.
everybody listening is aware of what happened, especially from your point of view, your community's point of view, and
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, what you've seen in terms of county response or
Yeah.
not, state and federal response or not, certainly
Mm-hmm.
Vistra's response,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and
We talked about all that. Yeah.
that would be great. And you've got the full hour. And do you want to take callers?
Sure. Of course.
Okay,
Happy to.
okay. Nina Adino, who is leading the
Right.
effort in
Yes.
Santa
I know
Cruz
Nina.
County,
Yes.
she will be calling
Great.
in the last half hour. So
Yeah.
we'd like to get her on the air too,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
sharing the time with you. And thank you for being so
Sure.
flexible here today.
Of course. Of
Um,
course. Eddie, I appreciate you continuing to try and get the word out about this, Becky. It means a lot. Thank you.
oh my goodness, Brian, what appalls me is that it has not been on the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors agenda since that one
Right.
issue in
Yeah.
January. How can
Yeah.
they
It's
how can they shove it under the
Well,
rug?
there's a narrative here that's developed, which is that this really isn't an issue, and that's not actually correct. But a lot of people believe that,
Yeah,
and it's just too bad because there are folks that are higher up the food chain who've worked really hard, it seems, to try and just move on for a
yeah,
variety of reasons.
yeah,
And there's a convergence between state interests, government interests, and the industry.
yeah,
That's that is it's pernicious in outcome given what's occurred, right?
yeah,
I don't think it was anticipated or designed to be pernicious, but given the immediacy and the the extraordinary impact of this, there's a need uh, to move on and to not let this be an obstruction to
yeah,
2045.
yeah,
And I understand that, but that leaves us behind in a
yeah,
way that is, in my view, unconscionable. And
yeah,
it's really extraordinary because it leaves an impression in the public, either by design or at least by preference, that there's nothing to see here. And that's what we're up against.
Hold
It's
on.
really a
Here we
challenge.
go. We're going to go on the air. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Welcome back to Hour 2 of Community Matters. I'm your host, Becky Steinbruner. And I want to thank you for carrying on, if you were listening to the first hour, the wonderful interview with Mr. Ross Gibson, local historian, talking about the Redman-Hirahara house and the importance of preserving it and other historic and culturally important places in our county and in our country. I am joined here now for our second hour by Mr. Brian Roeder. He is one of the movers and shakers of the Never Again Moss Landing Group. Mr. Roeder, welcome.
Hi, Becky.
May I call you Brian?
Please.
All right, thank you. Well, I appreciate you taking time. You are crazy busy right now, and I see all the good work that you are doing. Let's begin our discussion here now by having you introduce yourself and talking with people who may not know what happened in Moss Landing in January.
Thank you, Becky. So yeah, Brian Roder. I grew up in Aptos, Santa Cruz. I'm a local person. I was on the East Coast for about 30 years. I had some businesses out there that I started, and I was very involved in local economic affairs, and I served on several boards. I moved back here with my family, which includes our 7-year-old son, about 2.5 years ago, to be closer to my parents, um, who are, wonderful people and getting a little bit older in life. We bought a house in Prunedale. We look over the lower Salinas Valley up on a hilltop, and we look over at the plant. Um, when the
The
fire burned,
the
made us
plant
sick.
meaning the Moss Landing
Yeah,
PG&E
Moss Landing.
fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. When it caught on fire, it made my family sick. Within 10 days or so, my wife was really struggling to breathe. She's never had breathing problems. She's 50. Our son was starting to cough. I was filling up with fluid. So we had to leave. And we've been living out of a Airbnb since the end of January. I've been working from my office here because it's where my brain is, my computer. I'm kind of a communication node, among other things, for our citizen-led volunteer effort. Um, it's extraordinary what I've been learning, and I'll share some of that during this call. Um, I all I can say is that as hard as it's been for us to tear our lives apart, to leave our home, to be living in other spaces, trying, we've, buy a house, move everything, deal with all that while dealing with the enormous amount of time put into Never Again Moss Landing and trying to help our community understand what's happened. We're lucky because we're able to get out. There are hundreds and hundreds of people documented with illnesses that are clearly a result of this fire, who can't get out. They have livestock, they're seniors, they're veterans, they're retired. And the amount of illness that's been described at the Facebook group page that my wife put together, which has 4,000 members now,
Uh-huh.
the amount of illness reported is extraordinary.
Uh-huh.
And it's not everyone everywhere. It's like COVID. It's hitting people who had pre-existing conditions. My wife was in the Air Force and was near the burn pits, right? It's hitting people who have bronchial issues. It's hitting, in some instances, the young or the older folks, definitely.
Mm.
And so that's why it's not everywhere. It's why so many people don't maybe know why that this is happening. And I hope that the people listening will realize that this has happened. It is real. It's present still, and it's widespread in ways that not everybody understands. Because what went into the air was breathed in by all of us. It was inhaled by all of us, and those of us who are healthy may have had exposures that are going to make them unhealthy at some point. The more I learn, the more it looks like that's a very real possibility. So.
Mm. I wonder if you can describe for us um, how Never Again Moss Landing group started and how you have
Sure,
become involved in that.
sure. So the fire started on Thursday, the 16th of January. That weekend, we decided to leave. We went up to take our son to the city and have a fun weekend while the fire burned, thinking by the time we got home, everything would be fine. Um, my wife started uh, the Moss Landing Vistra Fire Symptoms Group on the Saturday, 3 days after the fire started, and by Sunday there were 2,000 people who joined.
Wow.
On Monday, one of those people got a group of us together, 8 of us together, at the Prunedale Grange to facilitate a meeting of the community, to come together. And I've got a background in facilitation, so I offered to facilitate that meeting to help try and direct people away from just anger and fear to getting into working groups that could look at implications of what had happened, areas that we needed to maybe get answers for. And we did that. And 200 people showed up and several hundred were online.
Yeah.
And this all just was thrown together very quickly. And that was the beginning of Never Again Moss Landing.
I was there. That was an amazing,
Yes,
amazing gathering.
yes.
Incredible job you folks did.
Thank you, Becky. I thought I might fail it and fall flat on my face, but it all worked out. It was a good start, and it was community based and all volunteer. And then by the time I transcribed my notes from that and got them out to everyone whose email we had and onto the Facebook groups, I looked around and realized that I didn't hear that anybody was testing to see what had come out of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And that really concerned me. So right about that time, some dumb luck was that a gentleman, a really wonderful man named Michael Pocabla, who owns Biomax Environmental in Pacific Grove. It's an environmental hygiene firm. I didn't even know that such a field existed. He reached out and said he wanted to help. And I asked how he could help. Could we do something to find out what came out of the fire? And he said yes. And he said we can put together surface wipe sampling, but we need to get into the hands of people so we can get samples. And through the network that was developing so quickly through Facebook and through our emails, in about 24 hours, we put together 150 kits, and we got them distributed in Prunedale and also at the Capitola branch of the Bank of America there in Santa Cruz. And we handed out 150, and 124 came back on the Sunday, the second Sunday after the fire began.
Mm-hmm.
And those 124 samples led to, which were properly tracked. They went through what's called chain of custody, so that they were valid and tracked from the time that they were taken till the time that they went to the lab. We sent them off to a reputable lab, and we got results. And the results showed, in some instances, shocking increases in what we believe is the baseline normal environmental presence of 4 metals: lithium, manganese, cobalt, and nickel. And our samples that came back, the tests that were run, the results which we have, showed that in places like Davenport and Carmel, where you'd expect really no impacts, we saw, just as a generalized, level for all 4 of those metals, you'd find 1/2 to maybe 4 or 5 parts per billion in the environment. One of the most elevated areas we found 2, 3, 4, 5, even 600 parts per billion on surfaces where tests were taken.
Yeah.
This is kind of like the canary in the coal mine. We only tested for those 4 because that's all I could afford to pay for. But they showed the presence. They showed distribution. They showed where this stuff had gone. And all of that's at our website. If people are interested in seeing what we learned from those results, those certified results, that lab data from a top U.S. lab, all they have to do is go to neveragainmosslanding.org. And if they scroll down the home page, they'll see the first map they see, which has a bunch of red blobs on it. If they click on it, it'll go over to a Google map with pins. And if they hover over any of those pins, they'll see the results of the testing data. And what they'll see in general is that between 3 and 8 miles from the plant were the highest and most elevated numbers. And the reason why it's 3 to 8 miles from the plant, although there are some places closer and that are also very elevated, but the reason why they'll see that is because this fire burned at thousands of degrees, and it was like a volcano. It pushed all of that material up into the sky. It hit the marine layer. It moved sideways. It was superheated. And as it started to cool down, it came out of the sky and started to rain down on people. Part of the problem we have is that that fire burned so hot, it didn't just melt those metals, it vaporized them like a fog. And that went out and was inhaled by all the living organisms in the area. Yeah. And it went into them as nanoparticles. And those metals, when they're nanoparticles, are incredibly toxic. And we know this.
Especially the nickel.
Yes, cobalt also. There are cognitive impacts from manganese and cobalt, I believe. And then the nickel and the cobalt are incredibly toxic. Now, as I was saying a little bit earlier, it's not like it's a uniform impact. Some people are predisposed, some people aren't. There's a lot of variation in what went where because of wind currents and eddies, because of topography. but it was there, and it was widely dispersed. People we know all the way up into the Santa Cruz Mountains were tasting metals, which is an indicator there was something in the air. And then a lot of people saw the smog all throughout March and a good chunk of the latter part of February. The fire lasted 5 days. We believe that it then smoldered. Pretty much, it was really hot, smoldered under the rubble for another month or so. It caught on fire again for half a day, and then it smoldered a little longer than it went out. And in fact, when you step outside, you can see the air looks a lot clearer than it did a month ago. So it wasn't just a fire. It didn't just last a few days. It was much, much more than that.
Yeah.
And we don't know the consequences fully. A lot of people are looking at this. I've just spent the day on the phone at Zooms. I've been in 4 Zooms today.
Oh my gosh.
And it's basically my whole day today. And what is good about these Zooms is that about 2 months ago, I started talking to our local supervisor, a very, very good, thoughtful man, Glenn Church, who's been really pushing hard to try and get answers and to get the state engaged in this, which in my view isn't really happening. And there are reasons that I can speculate about that. But Glenn's been really working hard at this. He lives here. And a lot of the folks in the government here in Monterey are working on this. They live here. But I told Glenn I didn't think the cavalry was coming, i.e. the state was not going to show up and help us. And I think that's been borne out. That said, I do feel for the first time some hope, because we are now finally, through a lot of efforts by a lot of people, keeping the story out there, including yourself, helping people be aware of this. We're hearing from a lot of not-for-profits and advocacy groups, environmental justice groups that are starting to reach around to us and say, we want to help you. We want to help your community. This is what we do. So 3 months in, plus, the cavalry seems to finally be coming. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'm becoming hopeful for the first time in a long time.
That is encouraging, because like you, I have been very disappointed at the lack of action by the Monterey Bay Air Quality Control District, saying that the air was clouded, but it was probably because people had fires in the wood heaters. What? And the EPA, their testing was completely inadequate.
Let me give you a couple of examples. So the EPA is here. They put out monitors right away. They're testing for something called hexafluorine, which is incredibly dangerous. It's inside these batteries. And on the Monday after the fire, the woman from the EPA got up and she said the fire destroyed the hexafluorine, which is flat out wrong. It wasn't destroyed. In fact, we now have at the website the EPA's own chart, which shows 2 spikes in hexafluorine. Now, it's in very small levels, but nonetheless, it's huge quantity potentially, because we're talking about 70 to 80,000 batteries that burn. And hexafluorine is in them as a I believe it's a transmitter from the anode to the cathode. So, but here's the problem with what they've been saying, which is first that it was destroyed, and now saying, well, we haven't measured it or registered it. The problem with that is that these were all ground sensors, and hexafluorine is lighter than air.
Yeah.
So why the EPA people didn't recognize that, say that, I'm not going to speculate. What I'm going to say is that they weren't testing for what was actually coming out of the plant, where it was going to go. And I have to assume as scientists they knew that. What happens is that stuff goes up, and what's shocking is that when it meets the marine layer, it's capable of turning into hydrochloric acid and hydrofluoric acid, which has not been tested for. There were no drones that were set up to measure in real time what came out of the plant. There was so the EPA, for whatever reason, continues to say that they've detected no measurable levels. Now, the other thing that you were getting at, which is particulate matter, they also say that they tested for particulate matter, and they did, but they haven't said down to what micron size. And as I said earlier, the fire turned these metals and other ingredients, PVCs and PFAS and other things are in there that are also very bad. Dioxins, those are very, very bad. They turned the metals in particular into nanoparticles. I don't know whether or not they were testing for the size of that matter. I have seen the air resources data, and it does show that the particulate matter in the valleys up in the mountains was higher because people were burning fireplaces to keep their homes warm in the winter. But that level of particulate matter, I don't know what the micron size is and whether or not that then is being compared accurately with any testing for the nanoparticles that came out of this fire. So we don't know if we're apples and apples or apples and oranges. It just seems like the message is nothing serious came out. And the health reports from citizens appear to indicate that that is not an accurate statement.
Correct. Has Never Again Moss Landing been corroborating with Professor Yvonne Aiello from Moss Landing Marine Lab in San Jose State?
That's one of the wacky things, Becky, that has happened during all this. So we released our findings, I don't know, around, I guess, early February. Dr. Aiello's findings came out several days before ours and got a lot of attention, of course, because he showed levels in the slough that were elevated up to 1,000 times or more above what he knew was baseline because he's been out there testing the mud.
Yeah, he had that baseline.
Yeah, he did, which nobody else had. So that was big news, right? That made national news. 2 nights, so about 4 days later, we released our results widely. Everything we're doing is transparent and open source. 2 nights after we released our numbers, I get a call from Dr. Yvonne Aiello on my cell phone. And he says, "Is this Brian Roeder?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is Dr. Aiello. I have the results that were published." He said, "I want to tell you that your numbers almost exactly correlate with mine."
Yeah.
What he said that the ratio of your metals, I've plotted them, and they're less than 0.5% variance from my numbers. Now he did it in a totally different way. He's testing cells. He said, "My numbers are higher than yours, but the correlation is almost exact." And then he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, "Your numbers validate mine."
I heard him say that very thing at a lecture that I attended where he was the speaker at UCSC. He showed the slide, and he wasn't going to show the slide until I raised my hand and brought up the work that your group did with the surface swipes, and he put the slide up and smiled and said, "Yes, I'm very grateful for that because they correlate. They correlate."
Yeah, they do. So what we have is data. The challenge. So people will say, "Well, okay, what does it mean, right?"
Yeah.
What's hard to explain is how I've learned how difficult it is to interpret the data. I'll just give you an example. The federal government generally has data that says that if you work in a cobalt factory, a factory that's dealing with cobalt, there's a permissible level of that in the environment. You're wearing protective gear, etc. So it's X parts per million in the air, right? How do you translate that into a surface wipe that shows parts per billion? The difficulty is being able to say this on the surface equates to this in the air. And we've been trying for 2.5 months to find answers, and we are finding some anecdotal evidence of what that means. We're not completely there, but we're still trying. And again, Michael Polcablo has been extraordinary in trying to help with this.
Have you been in contact with Mr. Don Smith up at UCSC, an environmental toxicologist?
Yes, we have.
What does he say?
So specifically on the issue of trying to interpret the surface wipes as a translation into volumes in air that could have been inhaled by people, Michael has come up with, working with another toxicologist, has come up with an interpretation. And my understanding, because I wasn't a part directly of the conversation, is that Dr. Smith has, and again, this is secondhand, but he's indicated that there's some validity, if not all, I can't characterize the amount of validity, but he did validate that the translation of the data had validity. Does that make sense? Because I didn't speak to him, but so he it's not validated like the example I gave with Dr. Aiello. That's a different application, different word. This word, when I say he validated what he is, he said that this methodology has validity, right? So it's a different interpretation of that word. He's
Mm-hmm.
not saying that, yes, this is correct and he's all in and this can be substantiated. He's saying that approaching it this way is a valid way to approach it, in his opinion.
I
And
see.
so that's part of the process of trying to understand what we breathe,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's, by the way, it's not just Royal Oaks and Prunedale. This spreads up into, of course, Santa Cruz, down towards Salinas. And I'll relate to you real quick a conversation I had earlier. And by the way, Becky, I just need people to know I take no pleasure in being the person to say that bad things have happened. I'm an easygoing person who likes to make people laugh
Mm-hmm.
and make people happy. And my job, unfortunately, has been to tell people what I've been learning, and it's not been particularly good.
No.
I spent quite a while earlier speaking to an individual who has spent the last several years working on industrial accidents. He's very involved in the train derailment in Ohio, East Palestine,
Oh,
which
wow.
is an ongoing crisis.
Yeah.
And what he said is that the biggest danger to health doesn't lie necessarily in the metals, but in dioxins.
Mm.
And he said the amount of dioxin necessary in the environment is minuscule for health impacts compared to what we have found with the metals. So the metals tell us where this stuff went that came out of the plant. The presence of the dioxins, according to this gentleman, is even further spread because its size is a scale of magnitude smaller than the size of these nanoparticles of metal, and so it spreads so easily through the environment with just a puff of wind will move it miles. So that material came out, and according to him, it's probably still here. It's easily disturbed because it's just so small and light, and it's incredibly toxic. And, we're going to try, I'm going to try and find a way to do some testing for that. There are individuals who are reaching out saying, maybe we can help you with some further testing of things that are not just metals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my hope that we'll find a way to do that. I don't know what it'll cost. Maybe they'll donate the time. Maybe, I don't know. We'll just have to figure out how to do it. But it sounds like there's another risk factor, which is these dioxins, which are
Oh.
probably even further spread than the vaporized metals.
And that went down into the salad bowl of our of our of our country, the Salinas
Yeah,
Valley.
the fruit basket for our nation. Yeah,
What
yeah.
what is
Um,
what are you hearing from farmers? I mean, I've talked with a couple and
yeah.
they just don't want to talk about it.
It's an excellent question. I want to be very clear. I was a farmer in Virginia. I had a winery and vineyard out there until I moved back here. I have great, great compassion for what our local farming community is going through. I've seen lots of fallow fields over the last 3 months, more than I ever remember seeing. And I think those are
Yeah.
farmers doing the right thing,
Yeah.
letting themselves go through a fallow cycle of growth at probably enormous financial loss, because they frankly don't know, near as I can tell, exactly what it means, just like we don't know what it means, but they're erring on the side of caution.
Yeah.
And I want it to be absolutely clear how grateful I am to these people I'll never meet for their responsible actions.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me
Yeah.
a second. I'm sorry.
I
Um,
I talked
here's
with
what here's what
one.
I'm
Go
here's
ahead.
what we're being Becky, real quick. Here's what we're
Yeah,
being told. I just wanted to preface that. Let me
please.
answer your question. The Farm Bureau, a lot of people have reached out and have been trying to get answers to your question. The Farm Bureau and the county ag commissioners are all on the same page since soon after the fire. And they've said that the fields were dormant and that there's no reason to be concerned about the possibility of metals uptake. I'm going to speculate here, and I want to make that absolutely clear that I'm speaking personally, and I don't have evidence to back this up. What I suspect is that absent any guidance from authorities saying that there is a problem, the idea is to under the very obvious financial burdens and potential financial impacts, to not suggest that there is a problem. That's a rational path to take. I'm not going to speculate whether it's the right one or not, but absent being instructed that there's a problem, I don't think that the farm community I think that the farm community from its leadership on down has decided that they're not going to make an issue because there are unknowns, which could potentially be resolved through the assistance of state and federal authorities. And I don't believe that that has happened. So I don't believe that the farming community in general, I'm not speaking of every farmer, but in general, has been prepared to raise an alarm over something that they've been told that nobody's told them they have to raise an alarm over. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Even the
And it's a
organic
rational
farmers,
decision.
even the
Yes.
organic farmers.
I know that organic farmers are being asked and they're trying to answer the questions. And while I haven't spoken to any myself, I've spoken to many people who have, and they're trying to be as transparent as they can. But also, I don't know that an organic farmer, these are people who live on very narrow margins, are in a position to do these tests. I personally spent $7,000 on testing to get those metal results. That was the cheapest test that could be run, the canary in the coal mine test. Some of these tests are thousands of dollars per test. So when you're looking at losing potentially a cycle of your crop, potentially losing business, being told that there's nothing to be worried about by the people who are responsible for informing you of what could be happening in the ag community, the leaders, potentially, I think it's a rational decision to say, I can't afford to test. I'm hopeful somebody will come help me. And I think that that decision has been made in many instances, but I have no proof of that. What I'm saying is I'm very empathetic to the position they're in. I'm very empathetic to our community looking for answers. And the people that should be going out and getting those answers don't seem to be doing that. And that's the state and the federal government.
Yeah. You mentioned there are some environmental groups now stepping in, offering help. Would that offer any promise of help to the farmers?
Well, things I've had don't involve financial assistance. In all of the the four conversations I've had just today, and let me real quick, I'll name these real quick. It's really easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll wake up my computer here. In those four conversations, agriculture came up in all of them on the behalf of the people who I was speaking to. The question of assistance is there in all those conversations. What form it can take. These organizations are just getting up to speed now, but I'll give you the name of some of these. I spoke today with a professor from UCSC. They're looking to put together a regimen that might involve planting mushrooms that uptake metal for long-term monitoring of environmental impact over in the slough.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to a senior environmental officer at the Government Accountability Project. They're a group that helps whistleblowers to be able to come forward in a safe way to speak about any variety of issues that they encounter. They may give us some tools to be able to help people who otherwise might be concerned about speaking about what they might know about how this happened, to be able to speak about it in a safe way. I've been speaking with Homeworld Collective. They're a think tank do tank. They have a in-field blood test that allows the ability to know immediately about uptake of chemicals in disasters. They're trying to put folks together in our community to go through this regimen so they can learn not just about what's happened to us, but more importantly, how to help in the next instance that something like this happens, because these things are happening in a variety of ways, industrial accidents more and more all over the world. I spoke today, I've been speaking to the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. They've been around since the 80s, addressing environmental disasters. They've been giving us advice. I didn't speak to them today, but they've been giving us advice on how to continue to gather information and help our community come together, because that's where the power lies. I'm speaking with a gentleman who's from this community, but now works in Sacramento. Someone call him a lobbyist. He's an advocate. He's engaged with the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewables. These are folks who are generally supportive, as I have been, of renewable energy and of decarbonization. But they also are interested in learning about what's happened, and he wants to find solutions. He's getting very involved in helping me and others to get resources to figure out what's happened in our community. And then I spoke also today to greenaction.org, a small, also long-term environmental advocacy group that has promised resources to help us start getting engaged with telling our story to people who can help us. That's just a sampling. That's today. So the cavalry, I think, is starting to come. We need help because we're just people trying to help our community.
Yeah. For those of you who are just joining Community Matters, I want to thank you. You're listening to Mr. Brian Roeder from Never Again Moss Landing, working with his community, our community, to try to get some help, try to get information, and try to understand what happened at the Vistra fire in Moss Landing on January 16th. And as you say, the cavalry isn't coming from those whom we expect would be there to step in and provide assistance. My concern, one of my many concerns, is that in Santa Cruz County, this has not been discussed other than one quick meeting before the County Board of Supervisors on January 28th. And the county supervisors are planning to put in 3 lithium-ion battery storage plants, not as large as what was at Moss Landing, but large, in 3 places in Santa Cruz County. One at 90 Minto Road in Watsonville is already in the permitting process and moving along, and is near College Lake, the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds, which acts as the evacuation center for our county, and in some very dense populated areas and farmland. The second place is in Aptos on Freedom Boulevard, very close to Aptos High School, also farmland and residential areas. And then the third is on Paul Sweet Road next to Dominican Hospital. So those things are moving along in Santa Cruz County, yet no one from the Board of Supervisors wants to hold a town hall meeting or bring it up on the agenda to be before the people. So there are grassroots, just like Never Again Moss Landing, grassroots group popping up and trying to do this good work on behalf of the people. So the thing that has bothered me most too about all this is that the health impacts have been largely just dismissed by the public health people, the supervisors, and what can you tell me, Brian, about what's happening there? We're starting to get a few callers, so Nina Adino has called in.
I'll keep it short. Yes.
Please tell us what's happening in terms of the county or the state gathering information about the health impacts of all of this on the people. It's huge.
Right. Well, an obvious thing would have been to go through and knock on doors. It's costly, but that would have been a very effective way to find out about the impacts. The Facebook group, the symptoms group, documents hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of entries from hundreds of people about health impacts. I've met in the last 2 weeks with both our supervisor and one of the supervisors from Santa Cruz, and they're aware and they are concerned. Okay, so it gets back to the idea of whether or not they're getting any sort of inputs that help them to know how to get a handle on this. So I don't want people to think that all the supervisors don't care. I don't think that's the case. I think it's the opposite. But how to then do something about it, especially when there's so much information indicating that maybe this is in the past, even though it's not, is difficult. And I have empathy for their concern and for their frustrations, because I do think that I'm not speaking for every supervisor, but I think that there are supervisors who, in both counties, who continue to have concerns about this. So I don't think there's been an effort to measure the actual health impacts. I don't think there's been an understanding of what they are. I think there's been, by the state toxicologies, the DTSC, disregard, I believe this, for the impacts. There was a news, and there was a county report out about a month and a half ago. The state toxicologist said he had not seen, he said he didn't think that our citizen tests were useful or credible. I can't remember the exact word. And somebody asked him if he had seen them. He said no, so we just dismissed them. And that's kind of been the approach of the state, unfortunately. So our county authorities are trying to get a handle on this. Staff are trying to get a handle on this, but Santa Cruz is further removed, but they know something happened, I think. And Monterey is here, and they're trying to get a handle on it, but they're not getting support. They're not getting resources, by and large. They are getting some things. We've been very hard on John Laird. I don't believe that our state senator has been engaged in this issue. He has not supported our community. He has a bill. It represents some aspects of what can be done, but it falls far short, as well as his lack of presence falls far short of trying to help our community. And we continue to publicly, let people know that John Laird is AWOL. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate because he's a person who could bring resources. Congressman Mineta is not engaged in this. Assembly Speaker Rivas does not, as far as I know, weighed in. So it's just, there's no effort there, as I can tell, of any significant effort to understand what's happened to the people who are exposed to this.
Yeah. Assemblymember Don Addis, I think, has been more engaged and has actually introduced some legislation, AB 303, that would help return jurisdiction to local control over other new plants like this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then we'll bring Nina on.
The appearance is that 303 is not going to pass. We're hopeful that we're trying right now to get Monterey County to symbolically vote to support it. I think that there's meaning in supporting both that and Senator Laird's bills. There's also a third bill, I don't have the number, that's been introduced, that is along the lines of Addis's, but it doesn't appear that there's support. The key thing about the bill is that would, to some degree, turn back the clock on the state being able to override local communities on the placement of these BEST projects. The state has put in place a process that makes it possible for them to force a community to take some of these plants, some of these facilities. And her bill is the only one that attempts to address that. So it's very important, but it doesn't look like the support is there. I think it's a negotiation. It was withdrawn from committee. Our hope is that 2 or more of these bills will pass and then go into reconciliation, and we'll get more of the better of them combined into the final result. Whether or not anything like that happens, we don't know, but that's our hope.
Mm-hmm. Is it all right with you, Brian, if I bring Nina on the line now?
Of course. Of course. Nina's very knowledgeable about these issues. I'm glad she's here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Hello, Nina. Can you hear us?
I can. Hi, Becky, and hi, Brian.
Hi, Nina.
Hi. Nina, thank you for joining the conversation. Give the listeners a quick introduction of yourself, please, and then any information you have and want to share about what's happening in Santa Cruz County would be welcome.
Okay, I can actually speak very briefly because, Brian, I believe that your efforts, Never Again Moss Landing's efforts to keep this issue in the public eye and to keep knocking insistently on our elected officials' doors needs to be heard. So I'm okay with just making a brief announcement that the 2 groups that are working together in Santa Cruz County, Stop Lithium Best in Santa Cruz County and Safe Clean Energy for California, are planning on holding their second community-wide public meeting on Monday, May 12th. It's going to start at 6:30, and we're going to be ironically, in Amesti Elementary School in their large cafeteria, where New Leaf Energy held the small community meeting 5 days prior to filing their application with planning in the county. They failed to list the time on a tiny postcard that they sent out to people. We have heard unconfirmed statements that perhaps they sent this postcard out to people on a 300-foot radius around the proposed BESS facility at 90 Minto Road, or possibly on a half-mile radius. So very few people in the community got this postcard, which had the time missing, and very few people came to that first meeting, which was held a while ago. Like I said, 5 days before New Leaf Energy filed their plans with the county on December 17th, 2024. So we're really looking forward to this. Our first meeting blew us all out of the water, basically. We had nearly 200 people show up. We did have an article written up in the Pajaronian. Thank you so much to that author, to that journalist, for writing that article. It was published in the Pajaronian and in the Santa Cruz Good Times. So we're looking forward to having another meeting where we talk about how we can work with our County Board of Supervisors to advocate for a response from them. They are not responding yet, really in any way. Again, unconfirmed statements that possibly they have paused the entire process of moving forward with this until September 9th, but possibly they are actually continuing to work on this and will present something completed in terms of an ordinance to be approved on September 9th. So we're not exactly certain where the county board is or the planning department is in this process right now. It's one of the things that we need to figure out. My husband and I know we've talked to Becky briefly about this just very recently. We are very interested in finding out from our County Board of Supervisors whether a constituent has the right to speak at a Board of Supervisors meeting for a longer period of time with a slideshow for say 10 to 15 minutes, because we've seen a number of these presentations already, especially one by Rob Shaw, CEO of 3CE, about the absolute necessity of having these BESS facilities, and that necessity cannot be questioned. And so we're hoping very much that citizens can actually present something like this at a Board of Supervisors meeting. So that's something that we have kind of in the works right now.
Nina, can I pause you there? And Brian, if we figure out how to do such a presentation, do you think that Never Again Moss Landing would like to be part of that to show the information that has been gathered, and the whole response part of what happened to regarding the Vistra fire? The Santa Cruz County Supervisors need to hear this again from the people. And would Never Again Moss Landing be interested in being part of such a presentation to the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors?
Becky, one of us is always available to try and tell the story of what's happened. As Nina knows, unfortunately, I tend to speak too much, and I apologize for that, but we're always available to speak. I've spoken to about 10 different groups on this issue in an effort to get the word out, and I'm always available to do that, of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to go back to the health issues. And Nina, I hope you'll weigh in on this. How can we, the people who have been affected by this disaster, it is a disaster, how can we log together to make sure that the symptoms and the difficulties are being documented, and verified so that there is something on file to show that when
Right.
these fires happen, this is what happens. And
Right.
we
Well,
go ahead.
first off, I encourage everybody who's listening to go to neveragainmosslanding.org, just like it sounds, neveragainmosslanding.org. We have a resources page. People can get onto our email distribution list. They can also send us information. We have a lot of information that needs to be posted up. I haven't been able to get to it. It's on my desktop, and I'm administering the website. I'm getting some help with this here, hopefully over the next week. People who volunteered who could start uploading the
Nice.
data. There's an extraordinary amount of information already there, and people can connect there. I also recommend that people go to the Facebook groups, which is one is the Moss Landing Disaster Group, and the other one is the Vistra Moss Landing Fire Symptoms Group. And there they can post, especially when it comes to health at the symptoms group, they can post what they've been experiencing. There's also a in-person support group that's mediated by Sheree Goins and my wife, Angie, that meets twice a week to help people to not feel isolated and alone. There's small groups, they meet and they talk. So there are resources that both can inform, connect, and allow for people to express themselves. We're working on Instagram and TikTok to be able to do outreach also. We need help. We need people to engage to be a part of this. And those are some of the resources. And if anyone wants to say, hey, I can help with this, that would be wonderful. This is all citizen volunteer based. Nita's group also. These are folks who see the danger in this technology and the way that it is being rushed into to help us accomplish very valid goals to decarbonize by 2045. And there are alternative technologies coming out. Third generation and fourth generation technologies are being developed. But our race to embrace this type of storage of energy is problematic at best. One real quick point, Becky. The way this works, and I think this is important, is that during the day we are producing more energy in our state than we can consume. It's being purchased at a very low price by companies like Vistra to be pushed through the power lines that have been here since the 50s into holding storage facilities, enormous holding storage facilities like the one that burned. It sits there in these batteries, charging them up, and then resold at a premium to the public. We are paying the cost of all this. And then
That's right.
when it burns, the company goes silent. The state is absent. The resources to help this community understand and recover. There are hundreds of people who've suffered, maybe thousands of people who've suffered financial impacts. The state has not made any offer to help them temporarily to get through that. No low-income loans, no interest loans, nothing like that. Kind of things you kind of expect maybe would happen. So it's kind of it's an unbalanced approach in my view to all of the benefits accruing at our expense, and then the downside, which Senator Lair's talked about. I think he said it's something like some eggs are going to get cracked, right? New tech. There'll be some collateral damage. I mean, he's spoken about this. Well, that's us. That's his district that he's talking about.
Yeah.
So, I just think that maybe a little more help would be appropriate under the circumstances from folks outside of our counties who are trying very hard to get to the bottom of this, but have limited resources because they're not coming from outside.
Yeah.
Nina, maybe you have a thought on that.
Nina, go ahead.
Well, I just think that this is going to be a long fight, and we absolutely have to keep going. I'm a historian by training, and so I don't know how many people actually remember this, but on July 16th of 1945, we exploded the very first atomic bomb, and we chose to do it over United States soil, right? So 45 years later, in 1990, or 40 years later in 1990, it took 4 decades, or over 4 decades, for the United States government to pass a law that actually is, I think, maybe was the first of its kind, it may be the only one of its kind, where the government apologized to people affected by this explosion downwind with an explosion that was done without alerting the public about the consequences of this. And of course, there's also restitution. And the other important piece of that is that there are still downwinders from that atomic explosion that have not won restitution. There are still people fighting for this. It's now 2025. It's shocking, and I don't know what else to say, but they haven't given up. And I know, Brian, in one of your previous interviews, you said that the fire burned so hot at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit is what some scientists are saying, that most of the metals turned into nanoparticles. Well, there's a famous photograph of teenagers in a beautiful watering hole in New Mexico a few hours later that afternoon, plastering their faces like as if they were doing masks, health masks, with the white fallout from this, standing in the water in the sun in New Mexico, putting this stuff all over their bodies. And that was visible. But people, I think, like with radiation, people don't understand nanoparticles. And I think we just need to keep getting that out there, and we need to, including the supervisors, we need to explain the extent of this problem and how long it's going to be present, and its uptake into, the food chain. People need to come to grips with that. And then the only other thing that I wanted to say is, personally, I am profoundly offended by statements made by some government officials and also representatives of lobby groups that are making claims that we have to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for this higher good. I don't think any community should be asked to sacrifice their health and safety for green energy. That is just appalling to me. And I found 2 or 3 instances now of people saying that it's our duty. One of the 3 CE heads said that recently. It's not our duty, and we shouldn't be asked to sacrifice ourselves, our children, our planet's future for this. So I guess that's my take on it. We have to keep going, and we have to keep fighting, and it is going to be a long fight.
Thank you. We're down to our last minute. I want to make sure people know May 12th, Monday, May 12th, 6:30 at a Mesty School cafeteria. Come to that meeting. Look at Never Again Moss Landing website and go to Tuesday's County Board of Supervisor in Santa Cruz, 9 a.m. Supervisor Hernandez office hours next Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. at his Watsonville office. Supervisor DeSerpa office hour Wednesday, 3 to 5 at 790 Green Valley Road. Brian Roeder and Nina Adino, thank you both for all the hard work you're doing, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you so much. This concludes Community Matters, but stay tuned and listen in for the next program, a good one as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you so much. Sure. Thank you for your good work. Bye now.
Bye.
Becky, those sad stories just keep coming.